Hey guys, Dark Angel here. So, as I told you, and I've been mentioning, I want to make this video here on the origin and the history of the birth certificate. As I said, there's a lot of videos out there uh, with a lot of people, you know, going into some unnecessary detail about the birth certificate and what it means. And there's a lot of people out there who misunderstood or misunderstand exactly what a birth certificate is. So I'm going to go in, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get off into a lot of the bull crap, okay? Because I want to get into this because this is pretty lengthy, but it won't be as long as my other ones. But it is definitely going to leave you going, huh. So let's get right into it, and let's get down to the get down. The birth certificate was originally named a settlement certificate, for those of you that don't know. Okay? So a settlement certificate, also known as a birth certificate, came into act in 1837 as an official document issued to validify recordings of the poor paupers, granting them certain basic rights and entitlement to benefits in exchange for recognition of their status as being owned as property and lawful slaves, also known as indentured servants and bondsmen. A settlement, therefore, is equivalent to a voluntary slave plantation. The origin of settlement birth certificates. Under King Henry VIII of England and his Venetian Magyar advisors, the first poor laws were promulgated around 1535, coinciding with the first official mandate requiring uniform record keeping by all Church of England parishes of births, deaths, and marriages. The poor were considered the responsibility of the church, including ensuring they had ample work and did not starve to death, as they were considered by default the property of the church. Under Queen Elizabeth I of England, a set of measures which were introduced which had the effect of accelerating the disenfranchisement of land peasants into landless paupers. Under the erection of the Cottages Act of 1588, peasants required local parish permission to erect dwellings, whereas before the erection of a dwelling by a land peasant on their lord's land was considered a right. As a result, the ranks of the landless, poor, or paupers swelled. Under Queen Elizabeth I of England, the laws concerning the administration and care of the poor were refined through the Poor Law of 1601, which introduced a basic set of rights for the poor, as well as the introduction of two overseers of the poor, guardian, in each parish, elected at Easter and funded through the law through the first levy tax through local rates, now called council taxes on property owning ratepayers, which is still in effect to this day in England. Okay? So that's just for any of you who don't know that. Okay, so if you don't know that, yeah, that's still in effect to this day. And this law is going all the way back to 1601. So that should tell you something, Under Charles II of England, right, the concept of settlements as plantations of working poor controlled by the Church of England was further refined through the Settlement Act of 1662 and Poor Relief Act of 1662, including for the first time the issuance of settlement certificates, equivalent to that of a birth certificate, passport, or Social Security card, rolled into one document. A child's birthplace was the place of settlement unless the mother had a settlement certificate from some other parish stating that the unborn child was included on that certificate. However, from the age of 7 upwards, the child could have been apprenticed and gained a settlement for itself through called indentured services or voluntary slavery. Also, the child would have obtained a settlement for itself by service by the time it was 16. Today, that's known as emancipation, where a juvenile can be emancipated. So that right there is just showing you that this is how far back these laws actually go. Okay, this goes all the way back to the 1600s, where they're speaking on the word emancipation that we know it of as today, back then. Okay, under the reforms of the Settlement Act of 1662 and the Poor Relief Act of 1662, no one was allowed to move from town to town without the appropriate settlement certificate. Okay, so in other words, if you didn't have the right certificate showing that you were allowed to move, travel, you couldn't do it. Okay, so there you go. If a person entered a parish in which he or she did not have official settlement and seemed likely to become chargeable to the new parish, then an examination will be made by the justices or the parish overseers. From this examination and on oath, the justices would determine if that person had the means to sustain himself. The results of the examination were documented in an examination paper. As a result of the examination, the intruder would then either be allowed to stay or would be removed by means of what was known as a removal order, the origin of the modern equivalent of an eviction, which makes perfect sense. Eviction notice, right? Okay. Modern equivalent of eviction and removal notice when a sheriff removes people from their home. According to the various settlement acts from the 17th century onwards until the introduction of the birth certificates, the issue of a settlement certificate was considered a privilege and not a right. Well. If a peasant wanted to move, the home parish could choose to issue a settlement certificate, which then effectively became an indemnity insurance to the new parish if the pauper was unable to earn a living. A settlement certificate was only valid if it bore the seals of the overseers of both parishes and that the local justices and was not transferable. This is the same model of modern passports for citizens listed as paupers or peons used today. Now you know what the P stands for on your passport. It doesn't stand for passport. It means paupers, poor person, or peons. For those of you that did not know that. Due to the increase in the number of poor in 1723, a new law was passed called the Workhouse Test Act of 1723, in which those who wished to claim benefits and relief as poor now had to enter a workhouse, being essentially a prison for men, women, and children, to perform some set of work. Now, if you think about it today, DSHS or EBT or whatever you want to call it, SNAP, whatever your state's welfare system is, this is all in conformity. This is how all of that was founded. This is the foundation as to what all of that stands on. Okay, so when you think about going to DSHS, okay, one of the first things that they want you to do is apply for their Work First program, such as the same here as mentioned in this writing. The workhouse, a prison. Okay, the only difference today is the Work First program isn't actually a prison, but failure to come in compliance with the rules and regulations that the workforce program has set in place, okay, will prevent you from being able to acquire the state benefits. Okay, because that's exactly how it's set up. It's set up to, if you sign up with Work First and fail to comply with the rules of Work First, your benefits can be discontinued. Now, granted, every month or every so many months, I'm not even sure how many months it is. I think it's every 3 months, 6 months, or whatever it is. You have to go through and renew your information, status information. So, but anyway, back to this. To ensure that all poor were accounted and could be identified, new laws were also introduced to force the paupers to wear a P on their right shoulders as a mark of their status. This is both the origin of the P, still placed as a mark on modern passports and other official documents, and the P worn by prisoners from the 20th century. Imagine that. Beginning in 1773 with the Enclosure Act of 1773, followed by the Enclosure Consolidation Act of 1801, English Parliament effectively privatized massive amounts of common land for the benefit of a few, causing huge numbers of land peasants to become landless paupers, and therefore in need of parish assistance. The Enclosure Acts are the foundation of land title as it is known today. Because of the deliberate legal theft of land under parliamentary enclosure laws of late 18th and early 19th century, the number of paupers dramatically increased. This led to the most awful and cruel laws being introduced to deliver to an elite few and slave labor force needed for the Industrial Revolution through the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, which effectively stated that the poor could not receive any benefit unless they were constantly employed in a workhouse prison. Thus, despite international treaties against slavery, the very worst slavery being wage slavery or lawful slavery was born, whereby men, women, and children lived in terrible conditions and were worked to death. Beginning in 1834, a number of historic changes were introduced to the record keeping of births, deaths, and marriages, and issuance of documents and the management of the poor. In 1834, British Parliament introduced the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, which recognized Church of England parishes into unions, which would then be responsible for the poor in their area and administered by a Board of Poor Law Guardians, also known as the Board of Guardians. The clerks of magistrate courts still hold the power of the clerk of the Board of Guardians to this very day, and is still using that format. In 1835, the Municipal Corporations Act of 1835 was introduced, which effectively standardized the corporate model for towns and boroughs. including making the municipality with elected officials responsible for data collection and services administration, and that is like a census, the census that we have today. So they're talking about census there, data collection and all that stuff. So they're kind of talking about census. And and that was section 1. And this what I'm reading to you is the actual Poor Law Amendment Act, and that was section 2. So here's what section 3 says. The Births and Deaths Registration Act of 1836 was introduced, which for the first time created the General Register Office and the requirement for uniform records of births, deaths, and marriages across the empire of municipal councils and unions of parishes. Thus, on July 1st, 1837, the birth certificate was born. July 1st, 1837, the very first mention of a birth certificate, was formed as the successor of the settlement certificate for all paupers disenfranchised of their land birthright to be considered, here it is now, listen y'all, considered lawful voluntary slaves with benefits provided by the local parish region underwritten by the Society of Lloyds, as it is still to this day. What? Did any of you catch that? Birth certificate secured you as a lawful slave to the state. What? Yeah, y'all didn't know that, huh? Yeah, y'all didn't know that. Now you see why the state can control you and do what they want with you. You ain't a free citizen. You never was a free citizen. Once that birth certificate was generated, you became enslaved, voluntarily enslaved. And you can actually say, or you can actually say that when you was a child, you wasn't actually voluntarily enslaved to the fact, because of the simple fact is, you got to keep one thing in mind. The states never looked at a child as being a resident. So anything the parents did while we were young in reference to our birth certificates, our having social security numbers and what have you assigned to us, they voluntarily rendered us into the system as slaves. Okay? So, yeah, there's that. Imagine that. But, Okay, so, beginning from 1871, further historic changes in the administration of vital statistics, such as birth certificates and death certificates, with the introduction of health districts or sanitary districts, the Local Government Act of 1871, Public Health Act of 1872, and the Public Health Act of 1875 created a system of districts called sanitary districts, governed by a sanitary authority responsible for various public health matters, including mental health, legally known as sanity. Two types of sanitary districts were created, being urban and rural, while the sanitary districts were abolished. In 1894, with the Local Government Act of 1894, the administration of the poor is still maintained in part under the concept of district health boards of guardians, including magistrates and other justices of the peace. Or, to put it point blank and simple, DSHS. And as you know, it's all capitalized, so as you know, it's fictitious, just in case you're wondering. Since 1990, under the United Nations and World Health Organization, WHO, Huh. Interesting that that would be the abbreviation for that. Who, by the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the system of issuing birth certificates as proof of a man or woman being a permanent member of the underclass, has become a international system. Birth certificate as proof one is born on the land. One fundamental flaw that remains within the settlement birth certificate system for the Roman cult and its agents remains the fact that a settlement certificate is proof that a man or woman must have been born on the land for the certificate to have effect. Regardless of convoluted subsequent presumptions of what the certificate actually represents, if a man or woman was not born on the land somewhere, a certificate could not be issued. Therefore, any rejection or return of a birth certificate serves as perfected evidence that a man or woman was indeed born on the land and support to any affidavit of truth concerning their immutable rights from the divine creator. This built-in flaw is offset through the treatment of men and women as land themselves. Remember what I was telling you about how the United States sees you? They see you as property. They don't see you as citizens. They don't see you, well, you're a citizen, but they don't see you as independents. Okay, they see you as property, a security interest. That's how they see you. There's Supreme Court case law on that actually says that you are a security interest to the United States of America because it is a corporation. I'm just saying, it's all facts, people. It's all facts. So, let's see. This built-in flaw is offset through the treatment of men and women as land themselves through the deliberate corruption of the definition of land to include all that has been born naturally or self-improved on the land. In other words, the sharp-edged reason the system ultimately denies each citizen their share of the commonwealth is because they are considered cattle and mere creatures less than slaves. Cattle. United States citizens are considered to be cattle. And that's interesting because there's actually a case law on that. A couple of them, actually. A few of them. The birth certificates are not extremely valuable to the holder in whose name the certificate is issued. While it is true that the birth certificates are considered valuable securities that are traded amongst the private international entities and the elite, the holder in whose name the certificate is issued does not have access to such value. Instead, by holding the birth certificate, the man or woman essentially consent to being treated as a pauper or peon and sole obligation to the elite to provide mere scraps so that the man or woman does not die of starvation or great illness. There you go, people. DSH, food stamps, EBT, SNAP, all that. There you go. I mean, what more of a coincidence do you need, or what more of a mention do you need that would show that this is in conjunction with something that's happening today? And to reiterate and go back, if you go back up here, I actually kind of go against the part it says traded amongst the private international entities and the elite. The holder in whose name the certificate is issued does not have access to such value. Talking about the person whose name's actually on the birth certificate doesn't have access to the value of that certificate. Actually, you do. Because all you have to do is file a bond. Once you file that bond, you can collect on that bond. Now, that's a process all within itself, and I don't believe that at the time that the information was founded herein, that was made readily available. However, today you can, and it's a long process and a very long procedure. Your Social Security card's worth money, and you could file a bond on that as well. So instead, by holding the birth certificate, the man or woman essentially consent to being treated as a pauper or a peon, and sole obligation of the elite to provide mere scraps so that the man or woman does not die of starvation or great illness. As settlement certificates and later birth certificates are solely and purposefully designed to disenfranchise men and women from their rightful inheritance through voluntary enslavement and admission to being paupers, the system of birth certificates is wholly without legitimacy, a global system of organized fraud and crime, and without lawful effect. Now, if you read that, okay, basically what that is saying is once that birth certificate has been made in your name, okay, your inherent rights that you have all been forfeited. That's just the bottom line. That's exactly what that's saying, and there is no other way of getting around it, because basically it's saying that you forfeit all inherent rights, which are natural rights by the Creator, okay? And once that birth certificate has been drawn up and registered and issued, you all of a sudden now you become a slave. See? And I mean, it's proof in the writing. This is the history of the birth certificate, and it goes as far back as the 1600s. And it's showing you how it transformed over the centuries as it's come forward. And as you can see, it's in conjunction with everything that was in the past. It shows from the admission of emancipation to feeding the poor, someone always having control over the poor, okay, to admission of programs such as DSHS, welfare, whatever the system to be. This is all in conjunction with that. And that case, Shapiro versus Thompson, is a highlighted case, landmark case actually of 1969 that I just recently did a video on it. It's in reference to being able to freely travel from state to state to collect certain welfare benefits, that might be better than the present state that you're in. So you travel to another state to collect those benefits, and they deny your application based on the fact that you have an established jurisdiction. Now, if you remember in what I just read, what did it say in there about the right to travel and going to another jurisdiction? If you did not have the proper documents, you couldn't go to another jurisdiction. See? So you had to have, not only did you have to have a seal, a stamp from the parish or province that you was in, you also had to have a seal and a stamp from the parish that you was going to in order to make your travel legit. Okay? And the thing is people, it's not about the travel, okay? It's about the establishment of jurisdiction, of where you want to be. Okay, for instance, if we was to take and make this time back in those days, and I wanted to travel from the province of Washington to the province of Oregon, okay, I would need to steal the seal from Washington and a seal from Oregon in order to transfer myself back and forth between those two regions. So if that makes any sense, then you understand what's been read to you. So basically what they're saying is for the poor, okay? And this is all in reference to a classification, which, if you really want to get into it, a violation of equal protection of the law, of equal protection of laws, as well as discrimination, because you're discriminating against one class race, a lesser included race. You're discriminating against them by letting them know that you are poor. You have to wear a P, P for prisoner. That's classification. So, and you're only your own. Oh, and not to mention that once your birth certificate is admitted, you are no longer subjected to rights. You are granted privileges. Even says it in the history of the birth certificate. Your privileges, your rights are taken away, are stripped away from you actually, and you are given privileges. So, people need to think about that, because that's where it's going, And if you really stop and think about it, it's actually headed back in that direction. So, as I said, I've seen a lot of videos on birth certificates, but I've never seen one compared to this one right here. And I mean, granted, this was a short video, and the history on it was real short, straight, and to the point, and I'm glad that it was, because it took a long time for me to compile the information and actually find in the archives, the laws that actually mentions in reference to the British Parliament, which you have to understand the United States is under the foreign parliament of the British rule and reign. Okay, so you need to understand that. So when it talks about the inception of the birth certificate and all that, it is actually in reference to the birth certificates that are going on today. And oddly enough, they actually do call the offices that hold these records of birth certificates, death certificates, etc., vital statistics. Imagine that. So with that being said, again, Dark Angel's telling you, it's time to deprogram people. Wake up and see what the government doesn't want you to see, because what they're not telling you could hurt you in the long run. It actually can hurt you in the long run, and a lot of you just don't realize it. I mean, it's right there. It's on its face, but a lot of people have been duped into believing the lies that's been told to them, and they just abandon all hope and truth. And for those of you who are catching on to this and realizing what is really going on, congratulations. You're on the path to a better enlightenment, because of the simple fact is if we continue to bow down, not me per se, but if the people in general continue to bow down and succumb to or submit to the way of the government, okay, eventually they're going to encroach so far onto your rights that you will not have any rights at all. Everything will be a privilege, and you'll have to have permission for anything and everything you do. So it's time to wake up, people. Time to wake up. Again, I'm going to say it in this video as well. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll get to them. If you have any special requests, leave a comment down below. And or if you need some type of consultation in relation to what you're being told in these videos, just know that all the information that I am reading to you is factual. Okay, it either came from a Supreme Court justice, an attorney general, a state's attorney, a state's prosecutor, paralegals who's done extensive research on the subject matters that I talk about in these videos. All the information is 100% factual, non-altered information. Okay, the one manuscript that I read from, okay, that I am actually doing videos on, and I've actually stopped for a while within that manuscript uh, due to the fact of other things going in my way. But this is just to let you see, this is the one manuscript, okay? This is just one of the ones that I received in the mail from the Supreme Court Justice, okay? That's that one. This is another one that I have. This is one that I received from a Supreme Court Justice about the private side, about what the private side is all about and how to operate, okay? And the interesting thing about it is I actually have within this a manuscript by a brother that was written by Trent Goodbody, Acting with Honor as a King, the second edition of Freedom from Government. So I actually have I don't have the entire section of that, the entire manuscript, because I actually went to the site and downloaded his manuscript, PDF manuscript that was supposed to be on there, and I never received the actual manuscript itself. I've contacted Mr. Goodbody and actually spoke with him on several occasions through text message, and I have yet to have received the original manuscript of Freedom from Government. But I do have certain amounts of chapters of the second edition. So, and I know that Mr. Goodbody is a very busy man, because he's doing this fight just like we are, just like I am. So, I don't hold him liable for, failure to ascertain the information or surrender the information, But, hopefully one day me and him can actually sit down, touch bases, and even if it's through email or text message or whatever, sit down, touch bases, and I can acquire the link to both of these books that he has written. He's wrote several books, and you can go to his website. It is called freedomfromgovernment.com, and look at some of the stuff he's got. He's got merch on there that's very, very nice. I've bought plates. I bought the plates from him a while back, and I have them on my personal automobile right now, my van, and that's how I travel. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, and I've been looking for some kind of decent plates to put on my van, and I went on his site, and well, he had exactly what I wanted because it matched the style of my van. So with that being said, yeah, go to his site, Trent Goodbody, and check him out, you guys. See what he's about. Go over to Bad Wolf's channel and check him out. Bad Wolf's got some very good information on there that he shares. These are some of the people that I watch their videos and see if they're providing any information that I may not know about and or may have missed. And so far from what I've seen, we are all on the exact same page. So again, like I said, this information that I just gave to you about the birth certificates and settlement certificates is information I have not seen in any video, and I've watched thousands of videos, and I've never seen this information right here rendered to anyone. So if you would like a copy of that, I will be glad to send it to you. Like I said, if you have any questions, any requests that there's a case law, a specific case law that you would like me to cover, leave it in the comments below. Send it to my email at angeljohnson950@gmail.com, and make sure that if you send me an email, Okay? You leave in the comments the name of the email that you're sending an email to me from. This way, when I go through my inbox, I know not to just erase the email, because I do not sit there and go through every single email, one email at a time. I go through and erase, and empty my inbox out, because I'm not going to sit there and try to go through all those emails. No, I'm not doing all that. But if you specifically put the email address that you're sending the email to me from, okay, I will see that, and I will address that email accordingly in the order as I receive them. Okay, so if you're waiting for a response from me and you don't receive one for a while, you're on the list, and you will be given an answer in response to whatever it is you're asking. I promise you that. That's one thing. Like I said, this channel is about the truth. This channel is about getting the truth out there for all those who have been had the wool pulled over their eyes and not realized that they've been duped their whole life into believing that they were free Americans. Again, you are not a free American. You are an enslaved citizen. Once that birth certificate went into effect and you and your parents went and registered you, you became a voluntary slave. Okay? And I've been telling people that for forever. The home of the free, the home of the free, the land of the brave. It's not the home of the free. It's the home of the enslaved. Just saying. You don't get no better than that, people. So, but anyway, use your own discretion in that where that's concerned, and come up with your own thought process. You're entitled to it. I'm just giving you the facts as they were laid out and found through extensive research and the archives. And believe me, like I said, it took me months to find that information that I just read. And though it's not a lot of information that's actually on the subject matter, because I don't really believe that there is, but as you can go through, if you are of British descent, you would probably have a better chance of going through the parliaments over there and finding better archived law than what I would be able to over here. So, again, there's that. So with that being said, it's late. Dark Angel's going to get up off of here because he is tired and he wants to go to sleep. So, without further ado, Dark Angel's up and out, and deuces.